Alright, welcome back to the other video of Saruto, Uchiha, What If Naruto and Sasuke fused. Now, we left off on where they immediately find Tsunade, and that was whenever Jiraiya immediately goes up to Tsunade, and he says, "Been a while, right, Tsunade?" Tsunade immediately says, "Who are you? Don't you remember? It's me, Jiraiya. One of the three legendary Sannin like you. You can't be Jiraiya." And then he immediately says, "It's me." "No, it's not." And then Saruto speaks up and says, "It's him, Master Jiraiya, one of the three legendary Sannin, the Toad Sannin." "Oh, Jiraiya, it's you." Jiraiya immediately groans, all frustrated that she didn't recognize him at first. And that was whenever Saruto and him just sit down with Tsunade, and she asks what's going on. And he states he wants her to become the 5th Hokage along with all the rest of the village. And Tsunade slams her hands down, just giving a big no. And she shouted out all of that nonsense about the Hokage, which Saruto, who just gets outraged. Naruto's half was just not happy, nor was Sasuke's. Naruto's just like, "You don't give a thing for the village that you were born in. Not to mention the fact that you were the first Hokage's granddaughter," Sasuke's half said. And they're just battling, and that's whenever Saruto immediately puts his right leg onto the table, slamming it, activating his Sharingan. And that was whenever they're just still like, "Okay, so you want to fight, huh?" "Yeah." And that was whenever Tsunade takes him right to the outside of the place, and Saruto immediately comes up with this plan where he'll use a substitution jutsu. Tsunade says if he can lay one hit on her, then she will come back to Konoha. And Saruto says, "Deal." And that was whenever he came up with a plan to basically hide a shadow clone underground, and then use a substitution with the shadow clone. And that was whenever she would just soon get confused, because she would just be like, "What's going on?" And Tsunade, she just wouldn't know what's happening, and Saruto would soon explain everything. That's what went to plan. So he immediately just puts his hands behind his back and makes the shadow clone underground, and then immediately does a attack of Rasengan. And that's whenever it vanishes into thin air. And she's like, "He can't even do anything right." And immediately appears in front of her, and she dodges just in time. And that was whenever Saruto immediately grabs her from underground and immediately pulls her down, and he pops out of the ground himself. And she notices that was a shadow clone she was fighting. And Saruto explains every ounce of his strategy, and once she gets out the ground, Tsunade just immediately knocks Saruto out right before I could say anything else. Once he wakes up, Shizune explains that she will come back. So basically, Tsunade told them on the problem with their Orochimaru, and that was whenever the battle started. Like, he's just not useless like what Naruto basically was doing. He actually got into a pretty good fight, and someone Gamabunta. And that was whenever the fight just got more and more intense, with Saruto just multi-shadow clone jutsu, and he shouts out, "Fire style, fireball jutsu!" Tsunade was having her eyes open. I'm stumbling upon my words once again. I'm sorry. And she asks Jiraiya if he taught this guy what fire style was and wind style. And he's just like, actually, you know Naruto, son of Minato and Kushina, correct? Tsunade nodded her head. What about Naruto, son of Minato and Kushina? Well, you see, him and Sasuke Uchiha so happened to have fused by these weird earrings that Orochimaru placed on them. And whenever Orochimaru spotted Saruto in front of him, he's like, "Well, my newest invention so happens to work." Saruto immediately gets outraged at this and says, "I'm not your invention for long, and you're soon going to be roasted by some fire coming from me. Fire style, fireball jutsu!" He immediately shouts, and that was whenever Orochimaru's suit was burnt and Manda comes out. And that's whenever the fight got more and more intense. And soon Saruto was not conscious, along with the Orochimaru after escaping. And that was whenever they came back to Konoha and celebrated the 5th Hokage, Lady Tsunade. And that was whenever, like a month or two later on, the Sound Knit 4 come and Saruto takes them out with great ease, which they don't go to Orochimaru. And that was whenever Jiraiya and Kakashi decided to take Saruto out for a 3-year training. And 3 years later, Saruto comes back and he's just all like, "Hey, Sakura!" Which Naruto's half is just showing right there. And she immediately notices Saruto and blushes. And Saruto immediately just spends some time with her. They do the bell test, and Saruto just immediately goes down in a flash of light and immediately grabs the bells from Kakashi. Kakashi just is dumbstruck, thinking he overdid it a little bit on training Saruto. And that's never afterward, after being so exhausted, Saruto goes to the Uchiha compound and they both agree in their mindscape, which Naruto and Sasuke just see each other all like, "Maybe this thing wasn't for nothing, right, Sasuke?" Naruto said. "Yeah, maybe it wasn't for nothing. After all, we've gotten to know each other, and I'd see that you wizened out a little." "Hey, Sasuke! What are you talking about wizened out a little?" "Well, now you're just being annoying." Sasuke and Naruto laughed in their mindscape, and immediately, a few hours later, they wake up to the next day. And then that's whenever they immediately started training more and more. And the next video, we are going to actually do the time skip to like, how long in the future? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years into the future. And that's whenever we're just going to get Saruto to get with Sakura. Oh my goodness. I can't believe Saruto would go with Sakura after everything. And that was whenever Saruto would just be all like, getting wiser, but still the insane crazy yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Cool, powerful god shinobi whose name is spread throughout all 5 great nations. For those of y'all who are wondering what that was on the screen, it was just the windows opening up. And that was whenever they just immediately see all of the root keys there, and Saruto immediately says, "This has been a while, and probably the first time in years that we've all been together." Everybody nods their heads, and Ino and Sakura still are fighting with the rivalry over Saruto. And that was whenever Saruto immediately explains that something is wrong with them, and that's why he gathered them there. And they ask what is wrong with him. He immediately shows his hands, and they notice that his hands are kind of like glitching, like see-through. And they ask on what's going on. He immediately states something might be going on with the past, which makes everybody even more shocked. And he immediately says, "Well, I'm guessing if this is happening, then perhaps there's a possibility Orochimaru did not abuse us both." And so, basically, he immediately just states, well, there's a thing called a time stone. A time stone? What's a time stone? And he states that time stone is where, or it's just like some sort of rocky gem that can make you go back to any time you want, to the past, present, future. And so if they use the time stone and go back to the past to whenever the fifth Hokage came in, that was whenever they just immediately see the 4 Hokage heads, and they're just getting memories all back, especially Saruto. And so in the Mindscape, Naruto and Sasuke are talking to each other, and Naruto asks Sasuke if he remembers like anything whenever they were little, and Sasuke immediately says no. "I don't remember any of this stuff whenever we were not fused. If it weren't for Orochimaru, then perhaps we never would be like who we were today." Naruto nodded his head, and that was whenever the Nins immediately decided to ask Saruto what was the plan. He immediately states that they will go and find their past selves. Sakura just immediately says, "Well, where are we?" Saruto immediately says, "It's so obvious. We're inside Training Ground 7. And everybody else nods, knowing where they would be. And that is where we're going to leave it here. Next one, we are going to go and just have them find their past selves, explain what's going on, and you'll know sooner or later on what happened with Naruto and Sasuke's past selves. Like and subscribe to the channel. It really does me a big favor, because you'll soon get to know whenever I post a video. It's me, Saruto, over and out.